episode 39. Hello, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff, and I'll be your host as we listen to eyewitness encounters involving one of the most terrifying cryptids, dogmen. Our guest tonight is Anthony Cheney. Anthony, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
Hey Vic, thanks for having me.
Anthony, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Sure. It was back in 1997. I got into security out here in the state of California. And over the years, I've done in advanced forms of training for security, including law enforcement training, anti-terrorism, and other specialized related security stuff involving human security. And then after that, it was about 2013 in April, I retired and went on to doing photography and book writing.
Please tell us about the nature of your work and why someone who does what you do might be more concerned with dogmen than most people.
You know, that's a very good question. When I did security, I wasn't like your typical mall guard. I did advanced tactical nature type work involving being out in the woods, river bottoms, orchard, basically patrolling levees, river bottoms. So there was just some interesting things that you come across when you're out in the woods in areas that are not accessible to the public. Some of these places are pretty private.
Now that you know that they're out there, did you ever consider giving up that line of work for something that's going to keep you away from the woods?
I continued on for about 2 years, but I was on edge. You know, having that knowledge of something that exists when you never thought it didn't, you know, it opens up your eyes and you kind of begin to know what to look for and stuff when you're out in the woods and stuff. So I kept my eyes open and just really paid attention to my surroundings. One of the things I would do is get on Google Maps and check out the area. Always show up 30 minutes early to work to relieve the other guy to find out if anything's happened at the site, and also to kind of scan the area for anything out of place.
It sounds like even though you had that encounter and you know as a result that dogmen are out there, that you were still able to do your job, but were there any negative side effects as a result of that, as far as you being able to effectively do your job?
Yeah, actually I was on edge. I was very jumpy. You know, like if I hear something moving the bushes or in the woods, and I would just be pretty jumpy about it and stuff. You know, sometimes my partners asked if I was all right. I was like, well, you didn't hear that? And they're like, no. They're like, it's probably just an animal. I'm like, well, you could say that. That was probably just an animal, but what kind of animal? You just don't know what's out in this woods.
Yeah, I'd say just an animal doesn't really cut it, does it?
No, because, you know, like I said before, you never really know what's out there, especially the type of animal. I mean, especially when we got like a mountain lion or bobcats just 30 feet to 100 yards away from you. You're just walking by in the dark. Coyotes were a big thing. You know, you could be out there standing with binocs or night vision, looking around. Suddenly you hear something behind you. You turn around and a coyote creeping up on you. And you're like, okay, time to get back into the patrol car.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good at all. Were you into monsters as a kid?
Yeah, actually it's kind of ironic because one of the biggest monsters I like to watch in movies was werewolves. You know, where it's the whole classical idea that humans can transform into a werewolf. So I was pretty big on that.
Well, I don't think that would make you any different than most people. A lot of us were into monsters like that when we were young. Fortunately, most of us haven't had an encounter with what you saw that one night. As far as that encounter goes, we're going to get into that in just a few here. Before we do, though, I want to ask you, before you and your son had your encounters, how would you have reacted if a friend, for example, came up to you and told you about an encounter that they had had with the dog man?
That's a good question. I've actually had people come up to me before, maybe not dealing with a dog man, but I've had people tell me, some weird things they would see. I didn't pass it off or become skeptical. I just kind of kept an open mind about it and asked a couple of questions, to try to find out or figure out, just from a scientific point of view, to find out if there was any other plausible reason that it is what they had seen.
One thing I noticed in our conversations that we had leading up to this show is you use the term werewolf instead of dog man. Is that because you think there's a form of shape-shifting element to these things, or what?
I guess the reason I termed the word werewolf is because when I seen what I had seen, it's like exactly what I would see in a movie like The Hound, but a little bit different. But when I say werewolf, it's not like I mean a human that could change into a werewolf. There's just something very odd about it. I was like, this is a real creature, a real animal of some sort that's probably in that shape or form all the time, day or night. I didn't really believe that in the concept of a human changing into a werewolf, other than in Hollywood. You see the movies.
That makes sense. In 2011, you had an encounter. Please tell us about that.
Yeah, I was just working up in Chico. It was a Saturday night. It was covering a specialized dance club, doing armed security with about 5 other partners. And we had to check people up front for any guns. And, we've had people coming in with guns and we had to turn them around. It's like you don't need a gun at a dance club. And plus, we live in California with these harsh gun laws. But it was around, I want to say 1:30 in the morning that we finally broke away from that dance club and were able to head home. And since I lived in Marysville at the time, and my partners lived in Yuba City, I took the route to go through Warrenville to get to Marysville. And what happened was, I'm on the highway, it's around 3:30 a.m. And as I'm driving on the highway, there's like no other cars, because it's 3:30 in the morning, Sunday now. And I looked off to my right because I seen movement, like next to a road sign. If I recall, there was a road sign. It was pretty tall. But there's something standing next to it. And I got to the point, since there was no cars on the highway, it was just myself, I slowed down to like 25 miles per hour. I'm looking at this werewolf or dog man, and this thing's like 9-10 feet tall, just standing there looking at me. And I don't think it liked the fact that I noticed it. It probably could tell that I noticed it because I slowed down to the point where I stopped. But just as I was getting ready to stop, the dog man turns around, walks for about 7 or 8 feet into the field, drops to all fours, and then it quickly ran through the field, but midway, it stopped slightly enough to turn around to look at me. And when it was on all fours, when I got most of the features out of it, the light colored fur, it was like light tan, medium brown, just kind of blended. And what was scary was that its fur color would match with the color of the field, like the leaves, the tan, brown, and stuff. So at first it was kind of where somebody that wasn't paying attention could easily have missed it when it was standing next to the sign. They would have just kept driving on. But I had pretty good night vision, 20/20 vision, and like I said, when it was standing there next to the sign, it caught the movement of the creature. Like I said, I just watched the truck all fours going through the field, and it cleared it. It was so fast. It was very muscular. And it was making a beeline towards a tree line at the other side of the field. of a river. And on the other side of that river is the Oroville Wildlife Management Area. And it's only a day use area only. You have to get a special permit from the California Highway Patrol to be out there at night to like camp. And for some reason we have a lot of WMAs, or specifically wildlife management areas around here that are just day use only. And they have the woods or some source of water like a creek or a river running through it and stuff. And there's a lot of deer, coyotes, bobcats, but it's just really creepy to see this thing, and let alone its height. I mean, just seeing it at 9 to 10 feet tall, and just so muscular. It had like long fur. I mean, it was still kind of winter, it being in February, so it was really cold out that night. But I just knew this dogman creature could easily have run towards my car and flipped it over. I mean, that's how intimidated I was when I seen it. So, I mean, good. My first pretty much sighting of that.
When you rolled up on that dog man, at your closest, how close were you?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I was to the point where I was just, let's see, estimate here, about 50, 60 feet away.
50 to 60 feet.
Yeah, 50, 60 feet away. And like I said, what I noticed, I was trying to stand still next to that sign, like it didn't want to be seen. Because, like I said, when I came to a stop, it's looking at me, and then it just nonchalantly just turned around, nice and casual, walked about 7 or 8 feet, and that's when I got creeped out even more, is when it dropped to all fours. And now when it was running through the field, another thing that creeped me out about it was the way it was shifting as it ran. It was like shifting, and the only thing it kind of reminded me of was the movie American Werewolf in London, the way they showed that creature on all fours, and the way its legs just like shifted like that. And another thing I noticed is when it was on all fours was the height of its back would be at the level of my Chevy Malibu at that time. So it was pretty tall even on all fours.
That paints a pretty scary picture right there. If you were 50 to 60 feet from that thing at your closest distance, that's close enough to get an idea of any facial expressions it might have had. Did you say that it did at one point look directly at you?
Well, what happened was, when I was looking at it while I was standing, I seemed to be locked in on its face more. As I was looking at its face, it was like, I don't know, it was just weird. The eyes, just the way it was looking at me, it startled me. And that was just a few seconds. I want to say about, I had a good 8 seconds to process and determine what it was I was really looking at. Just standing there and being so tall, standing next to this, I believe the height of the sign was about 7 or 8 foot. But the most detailed features it got is when it went to all fours, because that's when it really hit me. And I really started paying attention to what I was really looking at. And that's when for some odd reason, is when I noticed the head, the face more. Especially when it looked at me, I didn't like that. It was really creepy when it just looked back at me when I got halfway through the field. But it had a long snout. I want to say about 6 to 8 inches long. And I could see the pointy ears. And the weird thing is I don't recall a tail, if it had a tail or not. For some odd reason, I just can't remember that or even factor that part in. It's like it didn't have a tail, but yet I'm wondering if it did. I was just so focused on the head and then the shoulders and its arms when it was running on all fours.
Well, I don't think anyone could blame you for not noticing certain details. You had to be in shock seeing something like that. Wow, that had to be one heck of a sight there. You didn't mention the leg structure, at least. I don't believe you mentioned the leg structure that you saw. Did it have canine-type legs or more hominid-style legs?
Oh, of course. No, it wasn't hominid. It was bipedal when it was standing. It was capable of walking. but on all fours, that's when I noticed the legs, because when it was standing, I couldn't notice the legs because of the weeds were so tall. They're about like, we get weeds out here that can get up to 6 feet tall. But these weeds were about 3 feet tall, so I just didn't pay attention to the legs really. And there were some construction cones out there too, kind of lining up the edge of the highway. But yeah, it was just, I noticed the legs when it was on all four, and the legs were like that of like a German Shepherd. It was like on the pads of its, I guess its feet or paws, however you want to term that. So I could see how it could stand up. And what I noticed, it wasn't hunched in the upper back area. I mean, he was pretty much standing erect. I mean, I can't say him, I don't even know, it could have been a female. It makes you wonder, you know, I mean, especially if other people are seeing these things, there must be populations of them.
Not an easy sight to get out of your mind. Moving on, Anthony, your son also had an encounter of his own. Please tell us about what happened to him.
Oh, yeah. It was 2012. I was doing the orchards and stuff like that. And so I kind of like to bring up the subject about what I had seen the dog man during the previous year. My second oldest son was visiting me at the time, so he overheard me talking to my current wife about at the time I said werewolf. And my son, you know, his head pops over and looks at me, and he interrupts, and he says, "Dad, there's something I gotta tell you about. You know, I was afraid to tell any adult." And I'm like, "Okay. What's up, son? You can talk to me." He tells me that over in Olivehurst, where he lived at the time, there's a big field beyond the backyard, and it's dark back there at night. He says he goes out into the garage. He had like 3 or 4 dogs. 2 of them were really big. They were huddled together inside the garage and shaking, but they were silent. They weren't whining, growling, or barking or anything. And they were staring straight off at the side door. Not the big garage door, but the side door, which went right to the side yard, and you can see the 6-foot fence. He said he steps in, and looking at his dogs, he looks over at the side door. The door's open, and he was in there to do some laundry at the time. As he's looking at the side door that's open, he sees this black furred, with like dog-like legs, shaped figure walk right past the side door on the outside. Curious, he's thinking, you know, wondering what it was he just seen. So he kind of walks over towards the big garage door area to where at an angle he could look out the side door, and then kind of walks up to it and peeks out the side door. He's like in the doorway now looking out. And he's like, "Dad, what I saw was a black furred werewolf." It went up to the 6-foot fence, and it just placed its hands on top of the fence and easily stepped over it. And it went into the field behind our house. Well, I had my son go up to my 6-foot wooden fence at my house, and I did like a measurement thing with my hand, kind of like what Bobo does on that show, Finding Bigfoot. We came up to the measurement that this creature he saw was 8 feet tall.
That had to be one heck of an eye-opener for him. You had your encounter already by this time, and I'm sure he believed you when you told him about what you had seen, but there's nothing like seeing one for yourself.
Well, it was disturbing to me when he told me that, because one, he was sincere, even though I spent many months after of drilling him over and over again about it, because I wanted to make sure. The reason I said it was disturbing to me is because when I seen what I seen, the Dogman werewolf, back in February 2011, and then this happened to him sometime in 2011, I think in summertime, he said it was when it happened, so this is like months after my sighting. It's the fact that disturbs me is that I was wondering if this thing caught my scent and somehow just decided to follow me home or track me down, because I go over there to pick up my son at the time when he would come and visit and stuff. He lives with me now, but at the time. You know, I would go over there and visit, and it just made me wonder, okay, this dog man I see back in February 2011, if it's big and tall like that and muscular and furry, and then this thing has the full capability of having not just excellent sight, even at night, but good at smelling, scent detection. But I was kind of relieved in a way because he said this creature was black-furred, and had the snout and the ears, and it was like a German Shepherd-like head and stuff. Is the description he gave me with dog-like legs. So when he said it was black-furred, I'm like, okay, it's not the one I've seen, which I've seen a light-colored fur. Then again, I'm like, well, that light-colored fur dog man I seen was 10 foot. What if that was the alpha sending a beta male out to do its bidding or something like that? I don't know. These are just questions that just plagued me and just never had the answers for. And background is law enforcement training and training and tactical security and doing armed security work and all that stuff. You got to think tactfully in those kinds of situations, and nothing's ever considered stupid reasoning, because you'd be surprised when stupid things happen. So you take everything into consideration. You spend some time thinking about such things, especially when you've seen one, and you're like, wow, these things really exist. Soon after my sighting, I did research about it and stuff, but I'm just glad I had that kind of investigative training to kind of consider the outcome, or especially the possibilities of what these things are capable in doing, especially when you got one of your children, one of your teenage sons telling you that they just saw a werewolf in the backyard climbing over the fence or stepping over it and going into a dark field. Matter of fact, I brought up Google Maps because I'm so used to the idea of living next to a city that I forget that I'm really in like a suburban, rural farmland type setting. And as I looked at Google Maps of where I live and where he lives, there's nice portions of fields that lead from the foothills and the mountains in the east, coming down into Olivehurst and heading towards the river bottoms just west of me. Because we live right next door to the levee, and on the other side of the levee is Walnut Orchards and the river. And I'm like, this thing could easily, with that height and strength, could easily maneuver in the dark at night around people's homes through these fields and get to more human populated areas. With my house, I went and bought a center light and replaced the patio light with some halogen bulbs and stuff, so I had better lighting because I have a small field next to me. So with tactical training and stuff, I pretty much took my home and kind of made it to where pretty defensive. And that's how it's affected me too.
As if it wasn't bad enough for you to have that first encounter, to get that phone call and find out about what he had seen, that just takes it over the top. I can't even imagine what that would be like. Less than a week ago, while at a place called Sutter Buttes, you had a scare. What happened?
Oh yeah, that was not cool at all. Yeah, I do photography, and I just got into starting doing astrophotography. It's basically where you just take your Nikon or Canon DSLR Pro camera and just a simple lens. By the way, I'm using a Nikon 18 to 55 millimeter kit lens that came with, and I set it to infinity, which you have to do a certain thing with it to do that. So we headed out to the Buttes, the Sutter Buttes. It pretty much presses on a small town called Sutter. We're on Pass Road. We pull over off into the gravel on the side of the road, and it's dark out there. It's like a quarter moon or almost half moon, and it's just a beautiful night scenery. Excited about getting some nice astrophotography shots with the camera. I get about 6 photographs in, but during that time, my son, he keeps looking behind us. See, our car's next to a barbed wire fence, and on the other side of the barbed wire fence, it's a hill that runs up for about 200 feet, and you're at the top already. But he kept noticing something as I was doing pictures, and as it is, I'm trying to get over my fear of going out in the dark, out into the rural areas, the foothills and the woods, because I spent almost 2 years of not going out from my house since I retired from doing the armed security type work in April 2013. From 2013 on up until last week, I finally just started getting out. But before that time, and during that time, I wouldn't go out. I was just too afraid. So as we're out there on Pass Road in the Buttes, my son's like, Dad, are there boulders out here on the hills? I'm like, no, not that I'm aware of. Are there cows? I'm like, yeah, there's cows, but they're not over here. They're like more that way, pointing towards the eastern hills and stuff. It's like, okay, Dad. Well, I get my sixth photograph in of the stars and the moon and the Sutter Buttes and the hills. And all of a sudden we hear this growl. I could try to mimic it. It was like it let out a breath. It was like it was loud and creepy. And I stopped. I looked up, let go of the camera. I looked over at my son. And my son at the same time says, Dad, did you just hear that growl? I'm like, yes. And then we hear this car coming. And I took that time to get my tripod legs folded up as this car just started passing us. And we quickly got into the car and we got out of there. And my son is so afraid that he started having an anxiety attack. But he was like, Dad, I'm having Tourette's. I'm having a Tourette's attack. I'm like, you mean an anxiety attack? He's like, no, Dad, Tourette's attack. He was that scared. He didn't realize what he was saying. He meant to say anxiety attack, but he was saying Tourette's attack. Tourette's syndrome is where you like tick, or you cuss a lot in some rare cases. But we pulled off into the ballpark parking lot in Sutter, where I used to hang out at night when I was a teenager. Because I used to live in Sutter, and I used to go up into those Sutter Buttes by myself in the dark back in 1993 when I first moved to the town center. I was all by myself, and I went up there. The only weird thing that's ever happened to me was the first night I went up to the Buttes. I was standing before the Sutter Butte with the blinking tower on top. I got my mountain bike out, and I climbed the barbed wire fence, and I went up for about 3 hills. While I'm sitting out there in the dark looking at the stars, I heard like mechanical voices, but it was so dark I couldn't see. What I didn't realize was that at the time, Beale Air Force Base, which is right next door to Olivehurst, I guess they had soldiers out there with night vision, and they were surrounding me, and I didn't know it. And they were like hiding in the dark because I started making out movement, but they kept their distance. And next thing you know, from the top of Sutter Butte, a black military helicopter with the spotlight already on flew straight down towards me. They were circling above my head, and inside the cockpit was a red light. And the guy that was sitting in the back was holding a very big assault rifle with a nice big scope on it. But over the PA system, the pilot told me I need to get out of there. It's not safe. You see, I didn't know there was an old missile silo out there in the Buttes. And I guess they were cleaning up the lead at the time, back in 93, 94, because there was all these green and black military helicopters flying up towards the Sutter Buttes from Beale Air Force Base at the time, and I just didn't know it because I was new to the town. That was the only weird thing that happened to me out in the Buttes. But when I got into town and started making friends and stuff, I was like, hey, let's go to the Buttes. And they're like, don't go up there. I'm like, why? I'm like, I go up there all the time by myself. And they're like, are you serious? They're like, don't go up there. And they're telling me about little people, UFOs, which eventually I started seeing and discovering what they were talking about. Now, the Sutter County Sheriff deputies did talk about, I guess, what had happened, and this is where the so-called little people come into play. A Sutter County Sheriff deputy, and they don't like to talk about this to outsiders, is this is something they would whisper at the sheriff's office, amongst each other, as I would learn and stuff later when I got into law enforcement training stuff. But one of the sheriff's deputies was driving through the Sutter Pews and had stopped because he saw what he said, I guess, was like a little alien man, bald and wearing some weird type suit. And he ran up the hill very fast, like no human could do. So that was just one of the rumors and weird stuff that you would hear about. And also this like witch's graveyard. Well, honestly, I think that was some kind of tourist attraction type setup that somebody started. That's a different subject. But anyways, my son and I, we pull off into the ballpark parking lot where I used to hang out when I was a teenager in this town, Sutter. And I looked at him and had to sit there and calm him down. And he mimicked the growl. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I heard. And he's like, Dad, I want to go home. I don't want to even be in this town. And so we drove back into Olivehurst.
What a strange night, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, and it really upsetted me because I really don't want to be influenced by the fear of when I seen the dog man. I want to be able to go out. I'm a wildlife photographer. I publish books of my creative photography that I do, and I'm just trying to break past that and just still get out to enjoy the great outdoors. But when my kids go with me, I'm on high alert. I just don't want something to happen to my kid. Matter of fact, there was something I didn't mention before. I didn't get to do this location. I can't say exactly where it was because I'm still under a 3-year confidential security clearance contract I had signed. Basically, all I can say was 15 minutes north of Sacramento, and it was a levee on a river. My partner had found out, and he called me and told me about it. But apparently, this mom and dad got upset with their, I believe it was 8-year-old kid. They drove out to this levee river area, and it's all open fields and everything. What happened is they dropped off their kid as a form of punishment and left him there in the dark. They came back 15 minutes later, and they couldn't see the boy. They called out, and I guess what happened was they had sheriff come out and everything, dogs, and the dogs would not move. They would not track down the scent of the boy, nothing. These dogs would not budge an inch. And that was a weird story that my partner had told me about that had happened in that area. And these things are the type of stuff we learn. I mean, like the type of tactical work we're doing, we're crawling in the dirt out in like walnut orchards catching walnut thieves using night vision or binoculars. When we got sheriff deputies that come down there to hook up the suspect that we already arrested and take him off to jail, and the sheriff deputies tell us, they've told us numerous occasions, they're like, we would never do the type of work you guys do. It's just too creepy. Sitting out here in the orchards in the dark at night, they didn't like it. They liked sitting in their patrol cars, navigating the streets of the cities that they're hired to protect and keep the peace in. But they gave us credit. The agency I worked for had a lot of respect with the local law enforcement in Yuba and Sutter counties, and they still do. They have a very good reputation, and with Butte County.
It sounds like a really creepy area, so I can't say I blame the deputies for feeling that way. You told me that a lieutenant you worked for has a family member who had an encounter. What did he see?
I could be pretty frank about things and straightforward. Matter of fact, I've always had my bosses tell me that I'm too honest to be doing the type of work I do. And I'm like, okay, whatever that means, well, then you need me more. I guess that's why they always told me I was their best officer, and they still stand by that today. But what happened was, this was the company I was working for at the time. We wore all black BDUs, and we're doing like gigs on the weekends and stuff. It was the time I saw, the dog man when I was just doing the gig, the dance club. Well, it was the next weekend when I went back, because we're just doing weekend work and weekend stuff. So the following weekend, I told my partners, what I had seen. I didn't care if they laughed at me or not. I mean, if they did, some of them ridiculed me. They laughed, and they would call me Crazy Cheney. And, you know, when you had law enforcement training and stuff like that, you know, you learn not to get so upset or uptight just because somebody's calling you names. Or, matter of fact, they teach you to take a nice, peaceful approach when you got an aggressive person come at you. That's why I always use the power of voice, and I've calmed down many situations and kept things peaceful. So they're just sitting there, you know, laughing at me. And then later on, my lieutenant and my other partner, who were pretty much close to concerning work, my lieutenant tells me, he says, you know what, he says, like, I believe you, because my dad, one night, it was in the Calusa area, some back roads. There's a lot of back roads with farmland and fields. But he said his dad was driving down the road and saw, I don't recall what it was, some weird creature, and it flew. It was standing in the middle of the road, and then it lifted up with, like, wings, like bat wings or something like that, and it flew off. The one that really grabbed my interest was my partner, when he told me his dad, lo and behold, in the town of Oroville, where I'd seen my dog man, his dad had a nice big ranch, and they had like cows. Something was attacking their cows. Well, one night he grabs a shotgun. My partner's dad did grabs a shotgun and went out there to keep an eye on his cows, and comes across a 6-foot dogman-like creature, but with glowing red eyes. I didn't see that in the dogman that I've seen. It had like amber yellow eyes, but I lost sight of that when it went to all fours, and that's when I was like locked in on the head shape and the shoulders, and it was just really bizarre to see something like that. So my partner's dad, as my partner was explaining it, was that this one had like glowing red eyes, and I guess that's very rare in a few cases. Maybe it's just people are thinking it's red eyes because when the flashlight hits the eyes, you know, they just automatically think, maybe in their perception, because they were shocked at the time, that they think it's red eyes. That's how I kind of figured that out. But it was interesting that he told me the fact that this was in Oroville, which made me, you know, like I said, I did some research, and I guess we'll be getting to that part about what happened to some 3 young men above Lake Oroville, if you're ready for that.
I am. Go ahead and tell us about that if you don't mind.
Well, after my sighting, and then the following weekend when I told my partners about it, and then my lieutenant and one of my partners told me their stories, the whole time I was doing research, checking into Oroville area, I mean, I did everything, missing children, missing persons cases, whatever I could find, just related to high strangeness. Well, I came across a Bigfoot reporting website, and I don't remember the name of it, but in it, it says that 3 young men, and this is the Bigfoot investigator to that website, did the report, went out to Oroville, and it said that 3 young men were on like a dirt road above Lake Oroville, and they're just cruising along until they come to a stop because there's a dog laying in the middle of the road with its guts torn out, and this thing was torn open. They get out, and being, 3 young men, I think they're like 16 to 21 years old, one of them grabs a stick and pokes at it, and they're standing there looking at the dog, and I think they're getting ready to remove it, put it off to the side of the road, when suddenly they hear snarling and growling, and they look off to their right at the woods, and they said it was a werewolf that came charging out of the trees towards them. They jumped in their car, and they sped off on this dirt road. They're doing about 35 miles per hour, and this creature was running alongside their car until they picked up speed, and then it stopped chasing them. So now I didn't feel alone in my dogman sighting. I was like relieved.
Misery loves company. I can't blame you for feeling better knowing that other people have seen these things, but it's a fact. Misery loves company. When people find out that other people have seen dogmen too, it always seems to make them feel better, and I understand why.
Well, I mean, my gosh, we're out there. Like I said, we're not, you know, like doing, you know, we're not like your security guard, you know, we're like doing tactical stuff. We're out there crawling in dirt, using night vision and FLIR thermal vision, you know, binoculars, and, you know, we're catching hard criminals. They're packing guns, machetes. I mean, I've been shot at 2 different occasions. One was at a high school, but just to remind you guys, this was back in, when this happened? This was 2012 and like 2011. Yeah, that's right. So we're doing this very serious nature type work, and we're actually arresting people. You know, we didn't mess around. And sometimes we had to get aggressive with these guys, you know, because we're talking about, like, you'd be out in the middle of a walnut orchard, you know, you're hiding up in a tree, or you're the one that's, like, spotlighting or using night vision, and next you know, you see a leg dangle down from a tree, and you know it's a suspect, a walnut thief that's hiding up in a tree. We've been startled before because we're walking through the rows of trees, and next you know, I think one of my partners had gotten jumped by one of these walnut thieves who was hiding up in a tree. And it was a woman. She just jumped right out of the tree at him and stuff, and yeah, they got her. Another unfortunate thing is you got homeless people living down there too. And some of these homeless people are families that got kids. We weren't worried about those ones. We were worried about the homeless single men at the time, and for good reason. They were packing rusty machetes, survival knives, and we had to watch out for that. They had axes. You know, they had the, like, little camps set up. Sometimes they would get sophisticated and would have, like, a gas generator, and we'd have Christmas tree lights set up. Fortunately, they were on the farmer's property, in which we're contracted and assigned to protect that property. And we had this thing where they were kind of cool to be there until we caught them stealing walnuts, you know. Now, when I mean steal walnuts, I mean stealing walnuts. It was just a grocery bag of walnuts. We let it go because we know they were just trying to eat. No, I'm talking about when they're bringing in a car or a pickup truck, and the whole entire back of that pickup truck is full of walnuts because they've been pulling walnuts from the ground or from the trees and throwing it in there. Sometimes it would come across like 2 to 3 foot tall rucksacks with the walnuts. And that's a felony, by the way, right there, because walnuts are worth hundreds of dollars. And so we're talking about actually $1,000, $2,000 or more in walnuts being stolen when we come across these people doing it. And so they would get arrested and charged with a felony for doing it. And I've come across a few. It was the ones that were just trying to feed their kids. You know, they would have like 1 or 2 grocery bags, and you know, they'd be scared, and it was sad, really sad. It really affected me, you know, to see that these kids are down here, you know, and they're just trying to eat, and I would let them, you know, let them go. I'm like, yeah, go on. The entire company was cool about it. Even the farmer, he's like, it's just a bag or 2, you know, that's fine from time to time, you know. I was really scared for these kids because of seeing the dog man and having an incident, which reminds me, when he had Bear on. Now, that's a cool dude, and Kumbo, too. Now, I enjoyed the episode with Bear because they talked about when he walked out from the woods to the edge of the field and looked off to his right and saw, like, the dog man, and it screamed. And it just raised the hair on my body because back in 2010, I was at the Sutter Bypass fishing at night. By the way, I don't fish at night no more. I just can't do it. But this Sutter Bypass was another location that we had to protect, and it's one of the locations where I was shot at by a teenager, and unfortunately that teenager's in prison. But Sutter Bypass is next to the small town Sutter and the Sutter Buttes. I was out there on the other side, the more western side. There's a little area, and it has like a little bridge. And I'm sitting out there, and I just caught a pike minnow, which is an invasive fish species at the time. It still may be. And all of a sudden, there's like splashing in water about 100 feet going southward down this creek. And it kept splashing even harder. I didn't understand at the time. Then I would hear like I know something hitting the tree, like tree knocking. And then all of a sudden, right behind me in this field, it's a rice paddy field behind me, and it's dark. I hear this loud scream, which sounded like a woman screaming for her life, but high pitched, and it wasn't right. It was very creepy, and so I got on the phone, called my wife, told her what's been going on. She says, "Get out of there." Well, the interesting thing is, this is like 2 years later, coming back into 2012 now. We're doing just south of the walnut orchards at this construction site in the dark, and there's a lot of coyotes there, and that's the area where they would creep up on you, or you would see a mountain lion or a bobcat. And my partner and I were standing there talking in the dark. All of a sudden, we heard this loud scream. And I'm like, that's the same scream I heard back in 2010 at the Sutter bypass. It's just like the way Bear described it. And that's why, like I said before, it raised the hair on my body, because I didn't know it was related to possibly coming from a dog man. You know, and it just, you knew it wasn't from an animal, because you know about the animals in the area that you're to be contracted in to protect. And so we hear this scream, and my partner snaps his head right at me in the direction scream, and he goes, "What was that?" And I'm looking that way. I'm like, I don't know. But in my mind, I didn't want to say anything, you know, because of the last time I got ridiculed by my partners from the last company I was with, doing the Chico runs and all that. All of a sudden, I hear scuffling behind me, and I look behind me. It's my partner. I mean, he's carrying a Glock 40, you know. He's running to his car, scared. He swings his door open hard. I mean, it was hilarious if you would see it. But yeah, it kind of irritated me and annoyed me, pissed me off that he would leave me out there hanging like that. And he jumps in his car and slams that door shut. And this is a nice car, and I was surprised that he slammed the door shut like that. It was very loud. And you could hear the door locks just click. And he was sitting there looking at me, and I think I gave him a finger, and I jumped in my car. And I did likewise. I just shut the door and locked the doors, and I kept looking in that direction. I grabbed the night vision and was looking, and then we made it through the night. But we were doing like 12-hour shifts. We were doing some serious hard hours in the night.
Is that the same partner who was out on duty with you that one night when the 3 kids approached him in a bad way?
Oh, yeah. That was not the same partner. This was my partner. I brought him over to the company that I moved over to in February 2012. He was the one that told me about his dad's property in Orville and coming across the red-eyed, glowing wolfman that was harassing their cattle, scratching and biting on him, I guess. So this partner of mine, who I brought over to the new company I was with, has a pretty good reputation with local law enforcement. He was on the other side of the river. I can talk about this. This was near the city. It was at Shanghai Bend. He was posted at the construction site there. I'm on the other side, in Oliver's side of the river. And this is when my partner and I had heard the scream, and he ran to his car, and I jumped in my car. This is like a week or two later. My partner is on the other side of the river at Shanghai Bend. He calls me up on the cell phone. You know, this is not something you're going to talk about over the radio, which we had dispatch and radios and stuff like that. And he calls me on the cell phone and he says, "Hey, Shane, you're not going to believe this." I'm like, "What's up, man?" And he's like, "I just had 3 kids, 3 boys. They must be like 6 to 8 years old. I mean, they're like too young to be out here at night in the dark. But there's homes right there, you know, brand new homes and stuff like that. So they probably live in that neighborhood. And there's like a levee. So once you get on the levee, you're on this like narrow strip of wooded area in the river. And at Shanghai Bend, you can, at times when the water goes down, you could cross and get over to the side where I was at, which was thicker with woods and a bigger area, you know, yeah, the trees and all that, and brush. The street boys tell him, and they were shaking, they were scared, they were crying. They had to calm the boys down. They said they just seen a werewolf. And I was like, no way. And he's like, remember what you saw back in Orville? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, these boys who told me they just saw a werewolf, and they're serious. They're shaking. They're scared. They're crying. I'm like, well, escort them. I said, get them up to the levee and watch them as they go down on the other side of the levee to the houses. And I think he did, you know, to make sure they're safe. I've been on that side of the river, too, protecting the construction site over there, and it seems a little bit more creepy, you know, but I felt relieved because you have the houses and all that. But where I was at on Oliver side, it's, yeah, you're going to need help very fast if bad things were to hit the fan.
With all the dogmen and other strange things these people around you are saying that they're seeing in your area, that must be an area that's got a community of dogmen and other cryptids around. If these other things, these strange things people are claiming that they're seeing are really there and they really did see them for whatever reason.
There's just something very strange about the whole business of dogmen. It's like they get seen, and then at times they don't want to be seen. But yet at times they get seen by people, and we get, I guess, new witnesses all the time, you know, and, you know, it's, you know, I was reading about the dogmen stuff, and I noticed most of it seemed more centralized in the Wisconsin and Michigan area. But in California, you know, I'm like, no way, not out here. And, you know, I did find more reports in Southern California. I think we're a year or two older than mine. And like I said, the one with the 3 young men on that dirt road above Lake Orville, that actually happened in 1997. I read the date on that. And so, you know, it just makes you wonder. But then again, I look, you know, through Google Maps, I look at the area, and I'm like, okay, you go towards the east, you're going to run into foothills, and then up into the mountains. You know, we're talking about Plumas National Forest, the Sierra Nevadas, a lot of Bigfoot sightings. And Bigfoot, if I saw Bigfoot, I would not have a hard time with that. Matter of fact, while on the job, I've had city inspectors and town and county supervisors from like Oroville tell me so many times while driving on the highways at night or the roads in Oroville, they would see a Bigfoot running across the road, but they just too afraid to talk about it to others, you know, because you get ridiculed, and especially when you're in that position, you know, that authority. Hey, I just saw Bigfoot. Oh, okay, let's go get this guy a psychological exam. Matter of fact, I might as well go into the one, if you're ready, about Collins Lake, the woman I was assigned to protect.
Sure.
Yeah, that was interesting. That's where I had my first and only, so far, thing with Bigfoot. So I had my thing February 2011 with the Dogman. Well, this is February 2012, and like I said, I just joined this new company wearing all green BDUs and tactical and all that, and I brought my partner over to the company I'm with. My first assignment, I'm not going to give her name to protect her identity, but she was I guess a known artist out of San Francisco, but she lives at a house above Lake Collins, or Collins Lake, and apparently my boss is, one's a retired deputy, you know, sheriff deputy, and the other one's an active police officer, but they gave me the report. They wanted me to go up there because of my experience and training of being out in the woods and stuff like that at the time. They sent me out there telling me that this woman is being harassed by a couple of guys. Her, you know, fence, she had like a metal fence. Some of it was barbed wire. It was very nice, soft fence. Problem is that the tops would be bent down. Locks on her gates would be broken off. Rocks thrown at her house. And I'm like, okay. You know, my bosses are telling me, they're like, as soon as you see a guy step onto her property, you take him down fast and hard and arrest him. I'm like, yeah, I got no problem with that. Here's the problem, though. It was my first night going out there. It was about, I had to be there at 9 p.m. until like 5 o'clock in the morning. It was around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I started hearing tree knocking. And I forgot to mention, this woman had 3 pit bulls, which I made friends with really fast, because these pit bulls were big. and they would keep me company outside because I had to hide in the shadows in the dark, working around on this woman's like 2-acre property. It was like 2 or 3 acres. It was pretty sizable. So I'm like creeping around in the dark and stuff. And these pit bulls, you know, they would, you know, kind of hang out with me, and then suddenly they would run up to the fence, and they would do the low growling, and then they would run up to another part of the fence doing the low growling, and that's when I started hearing tree knocking, and then there was some rocks thrown, and then I would see movement, and I'm like, okay, there's like 2 of them, and I'm thinking these are guys, but that's the problem. It wasn't guys. It was Bigfoot, and there were 2 of them. They were being territorial towards this woman. I got a glimpse of one of them. It was just like a dark mass, but he was tall. I mean, he was just tall. I just knew it wasn't a man. It was just tall, and the tree knocking and stuff. And I remember watching Finding Bigfoot. I got into watching Finding Bigfoot because of that Dogman sighting I had, you know, and was curious about Bigfoot back in 2011. So I learned about the tree knocking and all that. But here's the funny part, though. When I got off 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, the woman did not want me to leave. She was scared to death. She just did not want me to go. But I had to go, you know, my shift was over, and I felt bad, but I got home, and my bosses called me up, and they're like, okay, so how did it go up there? I said, oh, no worries. It's not some guys harassing the woman. I said, it's Bigfoot. And they were like, what? Well, the next day, they called me in and had me drug tested. I mean, I couldn't blame them, I guess, but they had me drug tested. 3 weeks later, they ended up dropping her as a client. I guess my other partners are not saying, you know, but I think they pretty much came up with the same conclusion that I did. They just didn't tell the boss, but they figured out that the woman's not being harassed by any guy, you know, so.
That poor woman. I can only imagine what she must have gone through. That's horrible.
Well, what was scary, too, was, you know, it was cold and windy, and then it died down. But I had all green BDUs on. I didn't have a jacket at the time, and I wasn't armed. I didn't have a firearm on me. I just had my PR-24 sliding handle baton, pepper spray, and handcuffs, and a stun gun device. You know, I didn't get my taser gun until later, and the taser gun is the one that the taser gun where it actually shoots out up to 15 feet or 25 feet. It's the police model and shocks you. But at that time, yeah, I wasn't armed. I just did not have the gun until months later.
Yeah, that's not good. Not a good scene.
But I'm very good with the hands and taking somebody down, and I would do whatever it takes.
Well, against Bigfoot like that, that's not going to go very far, to say the least.
No, well, when it came to Bigfoot, that thing would have approached me. I would have been like the woman. I would have been inside her house, crying with her, being scared, probably.
I don't think anyone could blame you if you did. That's understandable there. Now, moving on, Anthony, you were telling me about the Maidu having a legend about a big hairy creature that is somewhat Bigfoot-like in appearance. Tell us about that.
Well, back in February 2011 when I seen the Dogman, I mean, like, as soon as I got home, I jumped on the computer, got on the internet, and I woke up my wife, too, and I told her about it, but we talked more the next day when I had woke up around 2 o'clock in the afternoon after I got some sleep. I came across the Native Americans, the Maidu tribe, out here in the Oroville area, the Sutter, Butte counties, and they have what they call the Ko-Nuji. And the Ko-Nuji, if I'm pronouncing that right, it's K-O-H-U-N-E-J-E. And what that means is big, hairy, Bigfoot-like creature that eats human children. Yeah, human children. And then that's when I discovered the works of David Paulides about these missing children from national parks. And I don't blame him for not admitting or expressing his opinion what he thinks is making these children disappear, but I can only just come up with that conclusion on my own and not on the behalf of David Paulides, who does wonderful works, by the way.
Oh, I love his work. I can't get enough of it. Every time a new Missing 411 comes out on YouTube, I'm on it.
Yeah, I'll watch or listen to the shows on YouTube. Because like I said, you take advantage of resources, especially when they're free to you, like Google Maps, the works of others who are doing research.
Going back to that encounter that you had along the side of the road that night, Anthony, how much would you say that dogman that you saw that night weighed?
Oh, I put thought to that. I'm 6 foot, and yet I weigh 250 to 270 pounds that time. I'm pretty athletic, and I'm built. I'm not like buff, I mean, I'm built and well fed in the belly area thanks to my wife. But on that note, of myself being 6 foot and around 250 pounds, and looking at that 9 to 10 foot creature, I said that he's got to be 6 to 800 pounds. It was big. I wish it was a Bigfoot. And I forgot to mention this, but when I come to a stop, I actually opened up my driver's side door, got out, and I put my foot, like, on that step part next to, my driver's seat and kind of lifted myself up and watched it. And when it stopped to look at me, that's when I got back in my car. So I thought I was going to turn around and come back and let me know, hey, we got a problem now. You're like too inquisitive or something. I just wasn't taking any chances, and actually that highway is 55 miles per hour, the top speed limit. I ended up doing like 80 to get home.
Seeing how big, strong, and fast these things are, it's not exactly confidence-inspiring, is it?
When you see this creature, the best thing you can do, I would say run away, but after listening to Bear, what he said, it makes sense, just kind of try to back out of there tactfully as possible. Just back away, walk backwards if you have to, maybe kind of eyeing around to make sure he doesn't have a buddy with him or something that's creeping up on you, because I've heard the story about the couple in Maine where they're sitting on their porch at night, they like to drink coffee, and it was dark, and they have a spotlight, and they like to look at the deer that come in the yard, until the husband looks over at the wife and told her to get inside the house, because apparently when he spotlighted, there was 3 dog men in front of them creeping up on all fours, and he looked off to the right, and there was 2 more, for a total of 5 dog men creeping up on him. And that just scared me. It was like, no way. If they're being tactical, or if we think like animal instincts, they're very intelligent. They know what they're doing, and you got to think about that. Their sight, their senses, especially their sight. I mean, I'm using night vision in the dark just to catch these people at times. And these things, they don't need night vision because their eyes are night vision. There's so many factors you have to play in your mind, and I'm just glad I had that kind of training in law enforcement and anti-terrorism security, because it just, gave me that train of thought, those thought processes, and I would always have an eye view. Now that I'm not in, I retired. I retired because, it was that school shooting with those kids. It really affected me bad, and I pretty much hanged up the guns, and I quit. The company did not want me to leave. They just did not want me to go. They were like, please, you're our best officer. We need you. I'm like, I know, I'm sorry. And they're like, well, why? Why do you want to quit? And, and I just made up excuses. I couldn't tell them that because those kids at that school that got shot up by that psycho, it affected me so bad. I was sick in the gut. I didn't want nothing to do with guns, and I just, so, since retirement, I got into, because I'm very creative, so I got into, photography and book writing, and, just, I don't have to think tactical as hard as I had to when I worked, crawling in the ground and all that stuff, using night vision. I'm more relaxed, and my wife's noticed that. She's like, you're more relaxed, but yet you're jumpy, like a cat's in the 3-foot brush in her field, and making this scurry sound, and I jump. I look over there quick and make sure
Well, considering what you've seen and been through, I don't think anyone could blame you for being jumpy. Now that you know that they're out there, that's going to change anyone. Before we move on, I want to make sure I don't miss this point here. On the YouTube version of this show, I'm going to post some nighttime photography work that Anthony has done. When you have a chance to look at these photos, you're going to see why I was blown away by their quality. They're amazing.
Listen, for a while, like I said, I had to find something, not just creative, but I had to find a different avenue of type of work I could do, and it's slow right now, and that's fine, because the most reward I'm getting out of doing the book writing and photography is that my kids can look up at me and say, my dad's an author, he's wrote some books and he does photography, because they wanted me to quit doing my job the night I had gotten shot at the first time. And then a year later, got shot at again the second time, which was a teenager who went to prison. My wife and kids were freaked out. They did not want me to continue working the type of job I did. And I was like, I know. I said, it comes with the job. I'm trained to handle the situation. They didn't care. They just wanted me to quit. So that's what led me up to doing the photography work I do, and I'm just happy to say that I don't like to claim I'm a pro. I mean, we're talking about digital cameras and Photoshop, and most of the work I do, I don't even have to Photoshop. I mean, the camera's doing the job itself, and I enjoy the works of pro and amateur photography. It's very fun and something good to teach your kids to do, and rather than taking them out shooting a gun. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against guns. Guns are good to have when they're in the hands of responsible people.
It's time to wrap the show up here, Anthony. Do you have any closing comments?
I do. I think it could be a pretty good advice for people out there. Just remember there's all sorts of free resources out there you can use, and take advantage of it. Don't be doubtful, no matter how bizarre the story is of, a loved one or brother, sister, or friend that comes up to you and said they saw something very strange. And most importantly, this is something I've learned, and everybody knows this one. When I was a kid, my parents used to tell me this, especially when I would get scared of the dark in my room. Monsters are not real, they don't exist, don't worry. Well, I do the opposite. My children, I tell them that monsters are real. Whether they come in the form of a psychopath who's got a gun shooting up a school full of children, or a dog man out in the field or in the woods. That's something I teach my kids. I tell them about it, that monsters are real. And I'm very open with them about it. And some friends, and definitely my family, I like to remind them every year about my sighting that I seen in Oroville. Thanks, Vic.
Thank you so much for coming on, Anthony. You've been a great guest. It's been great talking with you.
You're welcome.
I really do appreciate it. Don't be a stranger, okay?
Oh, I won't. I'll stay in touch with emails. I'll send you some new photographs. Plus, I have those, the websites I sent to you personally. You could check those out. So feel free to do that.
I'll do that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I appreciate it. And you're very cool to talk with. You ask good questions. I like that. You're very professional.
Well, thanks for the good words. We'll stay in touch. If anything ever comes up where I could help you in any way, please do let me know.
Okay, I will. Thanks again, Vic.
Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye for now.
Bye. If you've had a Dogman encounter and you want to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you.
had it open all the way, and we used to have it locked to a certain so it couldn't open it, but we used to leave it open a good 2 inches, and you could hear it out there. And you just freeze in the middle of the night. You just freeze because you knew it was there. There's just no two ways about it. And I think in one of the shows that he did, the bloke said the feeling that you get when they're around. I think it was last week's show I heard. The feeling that you get when they're around. Yeah, that's what we had big time. Just this feeling. It's just, there's no words for it. It's just a feeling, and you get to know that feeling really well. And it's like going on high alert. All the bells go off and everything slams down. That's what it's like.
That's horrible. You and your family were prisoners in your own home.
Basically, yeah. We were renting the house. We only stayed there for a year. We got out right out of the area after that. But I still have to go and visit because my mum's still there. Through the day, I'm not worried at all. Come night time, I get a bit antsy because we have been followed. I only live about 20 minutes away from where my mum is. I live in New South Wales now, but I'm only like 20 minutes away from where my mum lives, so it's not that far away. And we have been followed home before by it to where we are now. It's called Tommywin Road, and it's a mountain, like it goes across the ridge into New South Wales, and we've been followed by the dog man, by being at mum's and leaving to come home and followed us at night. So yeah, it's very intelligent. A lot of people don't understand just how intelligent they are. So just be aware. Be very aware.
Oh, without a doubt. If your mother is living there, got two questions for you about her. Number one, has she seen one? And also two, I wanted to ask you if she's afraid of them being around, since I'm sure she has to know they're there.
No, she's never seen one. Thank God for that. They have been around the house. We know that. My brother also lives with my mum. We've had different things happen at the house, but mum has never seen one, and she'd just deny it anyway, because she's very religious, and anything that doesn't come into her religion doesn't exist, basically.
Well, at least that's comforting. She's not sitting there worrying about them 24/7. I hope that doesn't leave her vulnerable, but at least she seems to be dealing with it really well. As far as that house goes also, Lisa, I wanted to ask you to back up just a little bit. That time when Kevin ran from that dog man and dove through that window, was it dusky dark when this happened, or was it full-blown dark at that time?
It was full dark. Full dark. And being the country, we don't have any street lights around us. We had the floodlights on, so you could see it crystal clear. Normally around the property, it is very dark at night. It's very, very dark.
There was another incident that happened. I'm not clear whether this happened when you lived there at that house, but there was an incident where you had a knock at the front door.
Yes, it was at the same property. I was asleep. My stepson had come in to tell me there was someone at the door. So he went and answered the door, and I came out, and there was a group of 3 or 4 young blokes saying, "We've hit your dog." I said, "What do you mean?" And then he explained that they've been coming along, and it's 80 kilometres along this big flat where we were. They were coming along, heading to Currumbin, and they'd hit a big black dog. It was a big black dog, and they'd hit it, and it had gone over the bank. They'd stopped, and they got out, and they were searching down on the bank for it, and they were searching for it for about 10 minutes, and they came over to us, and they were saying that they'd hit our big black dog. And I just looked at him and I said, mate, we don't have a big black dog. I said, do you know any of the myths and legends of Crumman Valley? I said, you get back in your car and get going, and don't stop for anything, because that, I'm sure, was the dog men that they hit.
Yeah, that's not a good situation, having them out there looking around for this supposed black dog in the dark. Not good.
No. And the same thing happened to my brother as well, where I had my first encounter. He was coming home with a friend of his, and he hit a black dog. He stopped the car and he got out and was searching for it, and he couldn't find anything, and he just hopped back in, and there was a big dent in the car where he hit the dog on the back panel of the car. He said it just wasn't there. I said, do you realise what you hit? He said, but I didn't realise until I got back in the car. Where I had the first encounter, that's where he hit the dog.
Well, sometimes you're better off not knowing what's really going on. It sounds like that's exactly the situation he was in. If he had known what was going on, maybe that wouldn't have been as good as how it turned out.
Yeah, he was very lucky.
Oh, I'd say so. You briefly mentioned a legend that was created in and around that Currumbin Valley, Lisa. Could you tell us about that legend?
Oh, there's just supposed to be a legend of a werewolf in Crumman Valley that walks the road, so to speak. And of course, when I had the first encounter, knowing that story, that's what I thought it was at first. And as I said, I'd never heard of Dogman before. It just walks the road.
You know how some legends stretch way back, so far back that no one really knows when or how they got their start. With that legend of the werewolf of the Currumbin Valley, is that something that's more of an urban legend that came to light maybe 10, 20 or so years ago? Or is that a legend that just stretches back so far in time that no one has an idea around that area when it got its start?
Well, people started moving into Crumman Valley in the early 1900s. And as far as I know, the story goes back to when the first families came into the valley.
Well, you know how it is, Lisa, with a lot of legends, maybe even most legends. They get their start because of having some basis in fact. Considering what you've been seeing around there, I don't have to guess how that legend got its start.
Exactly.
Unfortunately.
Yes.
Moving on, you had a 17-year-old nephew who saw a dog man. Tell us about that, please.
It wasn't actually my nephew, it was two of his mates. They were camping down on the flats, directly down in front of my mum. My nephew had come back to his nan's house, my mum's house, for something, I don't know what it was, and he left his two mates down there. Now, while he was away, he went back, and the two boys that had stayed on the flats were absolutely terrified because they said they saw a black dog, and they were terrified by it. And they all had to go back up to Mum's to stay the night. They weren't going to stay down there, not after what they'd seen.
Yeah, I don't see how a camp out could ever be the same if you knew that one of these things was prowling around.
No, and I think that's how it moves through, is along the creeks, because the creeks don't have houses too close to them because it floods. So all the houses are sort of back off the creek, and I think that's how they move through unseen, is along the creek, following the creek down. I think that's how they move through, not being seen, is down along the creeks.
That makes sense. Around that area, Lisa, have you noticed more activity in the summer than in the winter? In a lot of areas, there doesn't seem to be any difference in activity, whether it's amazingly cold outside or not, but I wanted to see how things were with you in your area.
The first two encounters were getting into winter. My first encounter would have been in May, June, and my second encounter I saw that around the same time, May, June. But at the farmhouse it just kept coming around all the time after that.
Your youngest son had a strange encounter with one. Please tell us about that encounter.
My son was up on the hill at his nan's property. It's a very steep hill. On Mum's property it's all cleared, but the next door property there's a lot of scrub. Real scrubby, like real thick bush. I don't know what he was up there for. He just roams Mum's property like he always has. He's not scared of being on the property at all. He was coming back down the hill and he said to me that this dog had brushed past him. But he said it wasn't a dog. And at the time he probably would have been 7 or 8. He wasn't terrified. He just said it brushed past him. It didn't bump him, it just brushed past him. It just happened that fast that it came out of the scrub and the woods to where he was and brushed past him. I didn't know what to think on that one. I don't want to think too closely on that one.
I can't say I'll blame you. It makes you wonder what that was all about, what it had on its mind to do something like that.
I have no idea. I've got my theories, but I mean, that's just my theory.
I'd love to hear it if you wouldn't mind sharing it.
Well, my theory is they know who lives on the properties and who are the visitors. They know. I've no doubt they know. They just know. Because most of the properties out at Crumman Valley are 10 acre, 20 acre, up to 100 acres. They're all fully wooded, like a lot of them have a lot of wood on them, bush. I have no doubt that they know who's meant to be there and who isn't. I've no doubt of that.
Yeah, they do seem to be, like you said, really smart, too smart for comfort, unfortunately.
Very. Anyone who knows that they're around and is very blasé about it, very, very silly. That's all I can say.
That wouldn't be a good move to let your guard down at any time when you know that they're around. You mentioned all the woods in that area, Lisa. Are there any yowies reported as being seen in that area?
Yeah, they have been, yeah.
Wow, sounds like you've got a hodgepodge of all kinds of cryptids running loose around that area.
That's a totally different subject.
Yeah, I'd say so. That's a whole show in and of itself right there. Other than your family, have you heard of any other people in that area having dogman encounters of their own?
No, I haven't. Because it's not spoken about. As I said in the first interview, it's just not spoken about. You don't hear anything. I have heard of cases of animals being tied up at the back of houses and they've come out in the morning and these animals are just ripped to shreds. Nothing in Australia could do that. Like, just ripped to pieces. The worst we've got are snakes. Crocodiles aren't anywhere near where we are. We've got snakes, we've got spiders. They're about our worst thing. We don't have bears, we don't have wolves, we have dingoes, but dingoes wouldn't even rip anything like that. Just shredded, apparently. There was a property up behind Mum. They'd tied a goat to the back of the house on a big lead. When they came out in the morning, the animal was just shredded, just ripped apart.
If you hadn't have had all that activity and all those encounters with dogmen like you've had, I guess that would leave you scratching your head, wondering what could have done that, but having seen what you've seen, there doesn't seem to be much of a mystery as to what did shred those animals that were tied up behind the houses and everything.
Yeah, I've no doubt what it was. I know there has been other cases. They just thought it might have been a Yowie that had done it. This is going back in the 1970s. There was a case of a greyhound farm being up the valley, further up than my mum's. They had the racing greyhounds. They'd tied this greyhound up to a tree, and I think it was one of the sons had found it ripped to pieces. Still tied up, but ripped to pieces. That was back in the 70s. So that was a while ago. It's just pretty scary that people have had animals tied close to the house and they've walked out and they've just found them ripped to pieces. I mean, it's just incredible that there's been quite a few cases of that I've heard in the valley, so...
It is incredible, and it is scary, the idea that they do things like that. There was another encounter, Lisa, that you mentioned to me about a gentleman who was, I believe this gentleman jumped into a pool somewhere out in the bush and found out that he unfortunately wasn't alone. Could you tell us about that?
That was my husband, Rob. He'd gone camping at a place called Natural Arch, which is near Springbrook, which is in Queensland. He'd gone camping, he decided to go and have a swim. It's a big natural arch. The waterfall comes through the middle of the cave, drops through the middle of the cave, and there's a big area that you used to be able to go swimming in. He'd been sitting beside the cave, like the cave's open, it's all open, but it's very dark. He was sitting on the edge and he decided he'd better swim back over because he had gotten hungry and it was starting to get a little bit dark. So he got in the water and started to swim over, and he heard 3 plops. He wasn't the only one in the water. There was another bloke in the water further over. He turned, and what he saw was 3 canine-looking forms in the water. They were obviously standing on the bottom because their chest was right out of the water. You could see the chest and the head. And of course, he was absolutely terrified. He got out and dove into his tent and curled up there for he doesn't know how long. He just said the screech that this thing let out was incredible. He said it absolutely turned him inside out. He finally got enough wits to get himself out of the tent and into the car and up this road that they had to get up. Natural Arch is the type of place that you don't drive at night because it's a mountain. It's a very mountainous road. It's very dangerous. He said he stopped the car and he ran to the toilets and locked himself into the toilet. And he just curled up in a ball. He said he thought he was dead that night. He could hear them outside walking around, and as he said, he just thought he was dead. He just thought his life was gone. He was waiting all night for these things to break in and kill him, basically. He had a big breakdown over it. He was that traumatised from it. He put himself into a mental asylum for about 3 or 4 months because he just couldn't believe what he'd seen, and it just, that still to this day, it terrifies him. To even speak of it, you can hear the terror in his voice. It's just horrible.
Wow, that's just too much for anyone to have to go through. Rob saw what he saw. I hope that he is able to deal with it the best way he can and pull through it. I've spoken with Rob before. He sounds and seems like a really nice guy.
He's gorgeous. He's seen a lot and been around a lot. He's not a bloke that would back off. He doesn't scare easy, but as I said, what he went through, that was his first encounter, and it just terrified him. He didn't know what to think, what to feel after seeing that. His life was turned inside out. So, yeah, that's what happened to him.
His life was turned inside out, as anyone who had gone through something like that, their life would have been turned inside out as well. When we talked about that the first time, Lisa, I think you mentioned as far as how deep that water goes, in that pool where the dogmen were standing, where the water was hitting them across the chests. Didn't you tell me that that water would have been over Rob's head if he had tried to stand up?
It was. He could not touch. He's 5'7", and these things were standing upright in the water, and their chest was out of the water as well as the head. So he said they would have had to have easily been 8 foot, if not bigger, because he never found out how deep that water was. He couldn't touch. So it's hard to know just how big they were, but he said he'd have to estimate it at 8 to 9 foot tall. They'd have to have been, to be standing upright. They weren't swimming, they were walking.
Ew. And there were 3 of them.
Yeah, and apparently he wasn't alone at the campsite. There was about 10 people that saw it, and they all got out. But Rob was the last one to get out. As I said, the road that leads to Natural Arch is too dangerous to be taken at night if you don't know it really, really well. I wouldn't take it. It's very windy, it's very mountainous, you know.
Yeah, it sounds to me like he did the only thing he could. They sure know what buttons to push to send people over the edge with fear. The fact that he locked himself into that public restroom there and they still were walking around outside just trying to scare him to death, that says it all right there about where they're coming from. That's horrible.
Yeah. Knowing he was alone by himself, he didn't go camping with anybody else. He just went by himself, and it was a well-known spot. There was always other people there camping. They would have all seen it, and they would have all heard it when it screeched. His words, it screeched. He said it just froze his blood when it screeched. That's what did it for him. It was the scream that really put him over the edge. It was the scream, screech, whatever you want to call it. I've heard that scream that they make. I call it a scream. It's not a howl. It's not a screech. It's a sound by itself that you just can't explain. It just makes you sick to the stomach. It brings instant fear. It's a sound that you can't describe. I couldn't describe it. It's just awful. It just curdles your blood.
Yeah, that screaming sound that they make, that's something that the last 3 guests, if I remember correctly, they've all mentioned that screaming sound that they make and how horrible it is. So, yeah, it's not just you who's heard that and has had to try and get over hearing something like that.
Well, that was his big thing. Mine were the eyes. His was the screech, whatever you want to call it. That did him in. That haunted him for quite a while, and it still does to this day. He gets very, very nervous, as you know. He's talked to me about it, but he wouldn't talk to anybody else because he just gets too overwhelmed with it. He can see it in front of him again, and it's horrible. It's horrible. I don't have that reaction. I don't know why. I have no idea. All I know is it wasn't going to take my life, you know, like it wasn't going to overrule me. It's my life to lead and I'm going to lead it. This thing's not going to get the best of me. So that's how I got over it. But as I said, Rob has never got over it. As I said to you in the first interview, there's nothing on the Dogman in Australia. There's just nothing. There's just nothing. You cannot find information unless you look it up on YouTube, and then you get all of the American stuff, which thank God I did, because that's where I found a lot of the information. But originally when I saw it, I tried to find information on it, and I couldn't find anything. Nothing that even resembled it. And that's very frustrating, because, I mean, I couldn't have been the only one that has seen one of these things. I knew that, but how I could find other people, I had no idea. It wasn't until I came across your show that actually been able to listen to other people's encounters and thought, oh, thank God I'm not the only one out there that has seen one of these things. I'm not going mad. It puts a real strain on you. How do you explain it? You can't. You can't explain it to yourself, let alone anyone else. It's just the way it is. As I said, especially in Australia, because there's no information at all on the Dogman. So you've got to research somewhere else, and my son put me on to Dogman encounters. So thank you, Jakey.
Well, I'm so glad that he did find the show and was able to let you know about it. The fact that you found the show and it's helped you, that right there is what makes this whole Dogman Encounters thing worthwhile. That's why I created the show, was to help someone just like you. The fact that you felt so isolated, you were in a place, Australia, where there really wasn't any information or support on these things, like you just said. Having that resource, that information there that you found when you found out about me, the fact that it helped you, I can't tell you how much that means to me. That's such good news. As far as Rob goes, please do remind him. Sometimes, for someone who has lived through a nightmare like Rob has, sometimes the best thing to do is not to talk about it. But at other times, the best thing someone like that can do is to talk about it. If there ever is a time where I could help by talking to Rob about how he's feeling about what happened to him, answer any more questions for him, please do let him know I'm always here.
That's great, Shane. Thanks, Nick.
Oh, you know you're welcome, and you know I mean it. I've got a question or two for you left here, Lisa, before we close this show out. The first thing I wanted to ask is, when was the last time you saw a Dogman?
The last time I didn't see it, I heard it. It was here, where we live now. Roughly about 4 years ago. I was sound asleep. We're in suburbia, I'm not out in the country. We're in a small country town. It started off as what I took to be at first howling. It got closer and closer as it came down the street. That was about 5 years ago, roughly, around this time of the year, coming into winter. This is right in town. I was blown away by that because I thought I was quite safe in suburbia, but yeah, obviously not.
Not to scare you, but yeah, they do unfortunately come into areas like that where you wouldn't expect them to come into.
Where we are, there's sugarcane right around us. It's a sugarcane district. And we're sort of on the edge of town. And yeah, it scared the living bejesus out of me. Literally, my heart went up. Because I just never expected. I mean, if I'd looked out my window, I could have seen it, but there was no way I was sticking my head out that window. No way.
Yeah, I can't say I'll blame you there. My last question for you here, Lisa, before we close this show out would be, what would you tell any of the people who live there in Australia that don't believe dogmen are there?
My advice, anyone who lives on properties, just be aware of what's around you, especially if there's strange things going on, as animals being attacked, tapping at your windows. Just be aware, please, and be safe, especially if you've got a family. Please be safe. Putting your kids' lives and your family's lives at risk is just not worth it.
That makes really good sense. Well, Lisa, I know talking about this is not easy for you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the show here and helping to get the word out. Like you said earlier, there are a lot of people there in Australia that just don't know that dogmen are there. They're a reality. Well, Lisa, thanks again so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Vic.
Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. If you've had a Dogman encounter and you want to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you.
As well. But I do love it here. The people are great. The food is amazing. Everything's fresh. And just, I love it. Love it.
It goes without saying, Cliff, you're a man of high adventure. When I called you the other day to set up this interview, you were in the jungle on your cell phone when you answered. I couldn't believe it.
My girlfriend's family is from there in Surin, Thailand. Outside of Surin. And, yeah, it's, I was kind of surprised there's, like, zero technology there. I forget about cell phones, I forget about everything there. And when she brought the phone over and said it was for me, I was taken aback. There's got to be some mistake. And it was you, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I didn't know what to think when you told me that you're right there by the border of Cambodia in the middle of the jungle. I thought, wow. It was about 2:30 a.m. stateside. I was talking to you. You said the kids were swimming and everything, having a good time. I could hear them in the background. I didn't know what to think.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's the hot season here right now, and the rainy season. It's like Africa hot here right now. It'll melt you right in your shoes. It's very hot here right now. Which, again, it takes getting used to, just like anywhere.
Oh, I'd say so. I can only imagine what kind of heat you're talking about there. Before we get into the details of the encounter you had there, Cliff, you're a very talented sculptor. Please tell us about the sculptures you've created, anything you'd like to share about how you got into that, anything like that at all.
I started doing Bigfoot sculptures, Sasquatch, and I did my first one. Gosh, I don't even know how long ago now, but I did 6 original sculptures of the Sasquatch, and I called them the Forest Giants. And I have a Facebook page on the Forest Giants. And from there, I went, and there was a huge response to the work, and I was very happy that it was so well received, and grateful, very thankful that everyone liked it. Then I did a Chupacabra that was hugely popular, and his eyes light up, you plug him in, got red eyes. And then I did the Dogman. I always wanted to do a Dogman. And I've done aliens. I just do, I don't know what my theme really would be there, I guess. It's just, I guess if it interests me, I like to try to do my best creating it in clay. But I also do light drawing, and I do painting as well.
Well, you're a man of many talents. The sculptures that I've seen that you've done are nothing short of amazing. In fact, that Dogman sculpture that you sent me the picture of, I'm going to post a pic of that on the YouTube version of the show so everyone can see the quality of work that you do. It's just amazing.
Well, thank you very much, Vic.
Switching gears here, when you were young, were you into monsters? Did you know about Bigfoot? Anything like that?
Well, I grew up in the 70s, so yes, I definitely heard about Bigfoot, and I was always a believer. I didn't really have any reason or evidence as a little kid to be a believer, but I just knew without question they were out there. And again, growing up where I did, I knew a lot of Native American people around me, and I had heard stories
from around Shoto, Montana. So many encounters with the Sasquatch that will never make it to a website or be reported, simply because those people up there aren't that way. It's just something, they'll never make it to a database, put it that way. But there's stories that I heard from people that I trusted, and boy, it just really lit the fire for me. And as I said, I did a lot of hunting. Started very young. The encounter that I had with this creature happened while I was hunting. My memory is not as focused as so many of your guests, which I apologize for, but to be honest, there's many things about this that are lost to me. That was part of my incentive in contacting you to begin with, because I've had several encounters with the Sasquatch. I've seen them. I've received a gift from them. I've had the what do you call that? Infrasound, where you get just dropped to your knees, sick and shaken in your boots. That's happened to me before, but never with the intensity that when I saw that thing there in Nebraska. Wow, there's just a lot of that situation that I guess I'll never know. I'll never remember. And I guess I can explain that when I tell you about the encounter. And as we've talked before, I'd love to have answers, and I know you don't have the answers, Vic. I know nobody does. Nobody can. And that's kind of the doggone it moment right there. It's like you're not going to get the answers.
I know it's frustrating. Let's jump right into this and have you tell us about your encounter, if you don't mind.
Sure. We were hunting in Nebraska. The location, it was between Shelby, Nebraska and Columbus, Nebraska. I was in a tree stand that I had built with my father. He was probably 3/4 of a mile away in another tree stand. And if you've ever been to Nebraska, but it's a lot of cornfields, huge cornfields. And there's these rows of trees that separate these cornfields, I guess. I'm really unsure of their actual purpose, but they're called a shelter belt. That's all I was told that's what they were called. And we used to walk them for pheasants, and we deer hunt in them. They're maybe 50 to 75 yards wide. No, not even that. I'd say maybe 50 yards wide. And they could be miles long. They're just a long row of trees. Well, I was right at the intersection of two of these shelter belts where my tree stands on. And the night was uneventful as far as I can remember. I was 14 years old. 79 or 80. 1979 or 1980, I'm guessing. And the hunt was over. And that was the way I was instructed when I was younger like that. Now, I had been carrying a gun since I was maybe 8 years old, and I had been shooting a bow, not much older than that. But 14 was when you could first hunt legally with a bow. I'd been in the stand all night, and it had gotten dark. Now, you can hunt usually about a half an hour or so after dark, where you can see what you're doing. The deal was, my father was that he would come down and pick me up after the hunt, and after the night was over. And I had sat in the stand all night. It got dark, and there was snow on the ground. And that was the only reason I was able to see what I saw of this creature. And it was, after seeing these Bigfoot, it's not like I was having picnics with the Bigfoot every day, but I have seen them. This was different on many levels. I guess it's hard to explain. I was in my stand, facing east. I do remember that. As I say, it was a cold night, dark, and I could see. The only reason I could see as well as I could was because of the snow in the street. And I first heard it, and I heard a growling and a snapping, like teeth snapping. And then I saw movement, and this thing was, I mean, it's so surreal explaining this now, but this thing was huge, and it wasn't Sasquatch big by any means, but it was big. Hard to get. I was maybe 10, 12 feet up in the air, guessing. Again, my memory on this is sporadic at best when I'm remembering how high I was up in a tree, but I'm guessing probably no more than 10 feet, 12 feet maybe. And I heard this thing growling and snapping. I thought it was a dog, a very big dog. And then I saw movement, and I see this black shape coming through the trees. But here's where it gets weird. It was walking like a man, but it was moving very strange. Its hands or its paws, I guess it would be, were up in a, I don't want to say marsupial or kangaroo type of manner, but they were held up higher, and they were jerking around. It was moving very odd, jerky movement, like really quick, like it was snapping its teeth. And this thing's coming towards me. It got maybe 10 feet of the tree. Again, I'm guessing that it was about 10 feet from the tree, and that's when it. I was watching it, and I'm a 14-year-old kid. And I remember what was going through my head was, what is this? Because it was walking upright, and it was big. It was big and burly. It was a big, beefy thing. And it was like I say, it had no idea I was there. And it was walking along, and it was jerking its upper body and its arms from left to right. And it was snapping these very powerful teeth, is what it sounded like. Now again, I'm seeing all of this in silhouette. So I was quite perplexed. I had no idea what this thing was. But it was obviously upright on 2 feet, and I could hear the snow crunching under its feet. But again, because of the background, the snow on the ground, I was able to see quite a bit that I would not have. It would have just been a black mess had the snow not been there, because it was so dark. And then it noticed me, and that was listening to your show of the gentleman in Australia when he said he was the same thing with him. He was watching it, and when it looked at him is when he got scared. And when it kind of snorted, it was rawr, rawr, and then it stopped. It got completely quiet, and it looked right at me. I tell you, I leaned back up against that tree, and I don't remember being utterly horrified, but I was probably pretty scared. And then it turned to its left, my right, and that was when I saw the long dog snout, and kind of like a timber wolf. From there, my encounter kind of ends. I had no memory of what happened after that. I remember it turned, and I saw the tail. I saw the tail before it turned, but I wasn't sure what the tail was. There was this big bushy thing behind it. I had no reference to even guess that there would be a tail on this thing. It was just very strange. But when it first noticed me and got really quiet, I mean, it was looking right at me. I could tell it was looking right at me. And I was in full camo. I had that nasty ear fence on that my father used to just get a kick out of putting that on my brother and I, because it's a rancid substance. And it stinks very bad. And back in the 70s, there wasn't all the science associated with deer hunting that there is today. I would imagine. I haven't hunted for years. But back then, you know, I was camoed out. I had the makeup on my face. How it saw me, I don't know. It was very odd. But it didn't know I was there until it noticed me. And then it just noticed me all of a sudden. And when it did, it got quiet. But then the snapping of its jaws, and it basically looked at me like I wasn't what it thought it was, or I wasn't too important. It didn't need to worry about me. And then it turned to its left, and that's really where I kind of lost it. I don't remember what happened. I didn't see it lope off. I don't know. I'm really in a quandary there, Vic. I don't know what happened to it. And I don't know where it left. A short time after that, I'm guessing, because that was, I'm a number of months away from being 50 years old, and this happened when I was 14. That's really no excuse for a horrible memory, but I don't remember what happened. I don't have it's just conjecture if I say the thing made me forget. But that's almost what it seems like. I would imagine I was in some form of shock, at least mild shock, simply because of what I was seeing. I remember thinking, well, it's just a big dog. It's walking on its back leg. That's unbelievable. But it was a very big dog. Now, I could have stuck an arrow in it, but that thought never even crossed my mind. But I know I could have. It was 10 feet from my tree, and it was a pretty big target. But, that never crossed my mind. But I don't remember seeing it. I don't at all remember it. But that's pretty much my encounter there. And then my dad, my father came down, and sometime after that, I'm not sure how much longer after that, but he came down and yelled my name, and then I had to get down out of that stand, not knowing where this thing was or if it was still there, and I beat feet through those trees out where he was standing in the cornfield.
And then from what you told me, that wasn't the end of the story. Most people who have encounters with these things, they're able to separate themselves from the place where they had that encounter, and in a lot of cases never go back, but that wasn't the case with you.
Yeah, man, he wasn't the nicest fellow a lot of the time. When I got down out of that tree stand, I was scared to death, and I ran, and he was a big one for being brave and being a man and all that. I made no qualms about it. I told him exactly what I saw. My instinct was telling him what I saw. I told him, I said, Dad, you're not going to believe this, but I told him what I just told you. Probably with a little more fervor than I'm telling you now. But I was spewing out what had just happened to me, and I'll never forget, we were walking back to the truck, which was a fair amount of distance away. And he looked down, and he said, you're back in that tree stand tomorrow night. I probably tried to argue that I should be in his tree stand and he should be in this one. I remember I went back to that tree stand the following night. But I don't have a memory of that, but I know my dad, and I know I was in that tree stand the following night. Now, I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything, nothing. There was nothing. And again, I would like to stress that I loved hunting, and I loved being outdoors all the time. But there was no real big video games. TV time was very minimal back then. We got like an hour, and there was a lot of chores and a lot of work. And I lived on a 26 stall horse barn we had right down at the bottom of the hill, which another part of this story happens there. there wasn't a lot of, there was no way I mistook what I saw. I know exactly what I saw. This thing looked like a big dog. But it was definitely on its back leg, and I remember seeing the dog legs. Listening to your past shows, you often ask if the person noticed the legs were more like a human or more like a canine. These were definitely canine legs. And I only saw this through a silhouette in the snow. When it turned is when I saw the dog legs. And I remember right then is when you get that really uneasy feeling, at least I did, looking at this thing. And its girth was, it was big, and it wasn't happy. Whatever the situation that put it in front of me was, it wasn't happy about it, I don't think. And then when it saw me, again, I think it looked at me as completely uninteresting, non-threatening. It stopped when it saw me, and then turned, and then I don't remember what happened after that. I just don't remember.
You know, Cliff, after we talked about this for the pre-interview, you found it so hard to believe that you wouldn't be able to recall what happened after you saw that dog man. But, like I told you in the pre-interview, I think you're not giving enough credit to the effects that shock can have. When you're in a situation like that, I think it's pretty easy to underestimate the effect that something like that can have on you. I wouldn't be surprised if you were in severe shock, and because of that, you lost that sense of time and you don't have any idea what happened to that dog man.
That very well may be. But I would also add that, living in Montana, I was around grizzly bears on a daily basis. Literally on a daily basis. The ranch I worked on as a kid, we had 18 collared grizzly bears on that ranch. Those were just the collared ones. There was wolves around. I've seen a fairly large black wolf, maybe, 50 yards out, 50 meters out, standing there in the foggy, cold air there in the mountains there behind Shoto, staring at me. I'm no stranger to, or at least I wasn't anymore. I am living in Bangkok, Thailand, but back then I was, very, very comfortable and very